Aloha, everybody. Aikane, you know, see that on your screen. What does that mean, aikane? Aikane was rare and widely accepted in old Hawaii, and it also shaped some of Hawaii's most significant historical events. The term aikane, which is in post-missionary times redefined to mean platonic, a platonic friend. I want to break down the word for you, aikane. So I, meaning to have sex or to be correct. That's what I means. I for me. I want to correct. I want to, you can refer it to sex as well. Kane, meaning male, man or male. Aikane is a very special word to all Native Hawaiians. It would be a terrible loss if we forget its true meaning and the most important to traditional Hawaiian culture. So that's why I'm here today, to actually tell you about traditional Hawaiian culture. Um, I have a chant that I want to, and I'm going to go line by line on this chant. And this is a really important chant because this is the only one. It's a ma'i chant. The ma'i is a genital chant. So it's all about the genitals. But it's also a kauna. You have to look at the kauna in this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the Hawaiian words and I'm going to do the English as well. He mea le'a ka e kalani. Such a delightful thing, oh heavenly. Ka opaio o ke akua, the sharping companion of the god. Ka u'u moa moa va'a, the sharp unseen point at the stern of the canoe. Ka ia I kapa ni nauvale kala, the fish called, just asking the sun. He ninau a e nei ia Maui mua, is asking Maui mua in the front. He ia ka lea ia Maui hope, here is the joy of Maui hope, the one in the back. Ka mea ne ia I kahikina I ka poi nei, the one who was rough last night. He lea ka mea ami I ka leva I ka pa'a, and delightful were the hips rotating in the lovemaking of the wall. Lea ke ka ki'ia o ka papa kele, delightful was that thing, the guard of the buttocks. Lea ko ihu I ka honi honi ana, delightful was the nose in your kissing. Lea ko maka kanana ana, delightful were your eyes in the gazing. Lea ko va'a I ka ha'u ana, delightful was the mouth in the gasping for breath. Lea na niu mau o kalapana, delightful were the reclining coconuts of kalapana. Kamea lea e, oh, such a delightful thing. So this is the genital chant composed by Kalani Opu'u, the ali'i of Moku o Ke'awe, your island. This was composed by Pa'ala, his rightful attendant. So we say his rightful attendant, but we also say his icon. So he wrote this. This is, and we found this chant. To be very honest, this chant is 300 years old. So I am very, very lucky to share this chant with you because it's in a very important part of our Hawaiian culture. So Hemea Le'a e Kalani, that is part of who we are. That is part of our culture. This is part of You know, Hawaiians didn't have. I should say this: Hawaiians didn't have um, labels. If you like somebody, go for it. If you wanted to have, if you wanted to be a sexual or lovemaking, go for it. And that's how the Hawaiians culture was. The aikane, the same-sex cultures in traditional Hawaiian culture. Hawaii has been long land of openness, and traditional native attitudes towards sex and sexuality are no different. When Captain Cook came to the islands, members of his crew documented the social and cultural norms of native Hawaiians, providing an invaluable glimpse into native life prior to missionary and other, sorry, I can't read, and other native lives. Among many of other valuable observations, they noted the prevalence of same-sex relationships among the elite ruling class of Hawaii society. Aikane in Hawaiian denoted both the practice of male sex relationships and those engaged with them. There were several different Hawaiian terms for same-sex relationships and their practitioners, such as ho'okamaka and lavakua, as well as mahu, which refers to an intersex or transgendered person. Aikane was the term for those men who were involved in a close social and sexual relationship with another man, typically a high-ranking member of the elite noble class. Captain Cook and his men witnessed this practice firsthand in the court of Kamehameha I, the chief who would eventually unite all the native islands, Hawaiian islands, under his rule. With the homophobia and moral condensation typical of Western attitudes at the time, one wrote, "We have an opportunities before of being acquainted with the despicable part of his character, which is not the least anxious to conceal," while another notes of the Aikane that their business to commit the sin of omen upon the old king. The account suggests that the homosexual nature of these relationships within the royal court were considered normal and unremarkable by the Hawaiians themselves, a fact supported by the evidence of oral history and comparison with closely related cultures to Tahiti and the Maori of New Zealand. Of that, in our chants and legends, the great god Lono meets a commoner and falls in love with him. He was the chief named Kapahi of Kauai. He says to Lono in one of the chants, "I follow you everywhere because I love you so dearly." The pig god Kamapua follows his aikane ni Ho'oleki'i in the play chants and legends. The fire god Pele yearns for his sister Hi'iaka, and the handsome chief Lohi'au and the lover of Pele yearns for his aikane Paoa. There is no known historical reference of Aivaihine, a female equivalent of the aikane. But this may be because Western chronicles of Native Hawaiian culture were themselves openly well male and had neither ready access to nor the great interest in Native women's culture. Hawaiian culture was very sexually open, and men and women tended to spend much of their time with other members of the same sex, rather than sequestered apart in a nuclear family units. So it seems likely that female sexual relationships were not similar common. We do know that some women in traditional Hawaiian society filled the roles that did not fit in the typical gender stereotypes, such as Wahine Kaua, battle woman, also known as Koa Wahine, brave woman, who accompanied men on military campaigns and sometimes fought alongside with them. Female sexual and romantic intimacy is also described in the mythology of the islands of several goddesses having lesbian relationships and liaisons. The arrival of Christianity and the Western influence particularly after the powerful widow of Kamehameha I, Kaahumanu, converted to Christianity, soon worked to suppress the Aikane tradition and force the Hawaiians to conform to Victorian sexual and social norms. However, the traditional did not disappear. The old Hawaiian character sometimes asserted itself. King Kamehameha III rebelled against the influence sobriety imposed by Queen Kaahumanu in the 1830s. King Kamehameha III brought back hula, he brought back dancing, he brought back gambling, and all sorts of forms were called le'alea. So if you say le'alea to a kupuna, they laugh, they like smile and go, oh, no, 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 no. Le'alea is a very important part of our culture. The people of Honolulu then overjoyed because of Kamehameha III, because he brought back the customs and brought back life again. When the time for Kamehameha III to appoint a kuhina nui, a prime minister, he was forced by other alii to bypass his iconic Kaomi and choose his half-brother Christian convert Kina'u, and other high chief turned Christian named Kai Pioeva kidnap Kaomi. And in a struggle with the king who had come to free his favorite Aikane, he said, "You are not the ruler of this kingdom. Please stop indulging in evil ways." That's what Kamehameha said. Kamehameha III rescued his Aikane. Kaomi returned to Tahiti, and within a year, Kaomi was found dead. Whether from disease or poison, we don't know. It is not known. Kamehameha III was very distraught at things to come for the Hawaiian nation. A little after Kaomi passed away, so did King Kamehameha III. Although Western influence long suppressed Native Hawaiian traditions of same-sex intimacy, the rise of LGBTQ awareness in Western society has led in recent years to a reawakening of interest in the history of Aikane, Mahu, and other manifestations of LGBTQ identity in Native society. With the legalization of same-sex marriage in 2013, Hawaii is proving once again to be the state of aloha. I would like to read you when we fought. I'm going to read you my testimony when we fought for same-sex marriage here in Hawaii. And I hope you enjoy what I said. Native Hawaiians has historically tradition embraced the concepts of relationships that people are equal, including same-sex relationships. When the missionaries arrived in 1820, they introduced extreme conservative moral atrocities upon Native people, as well as the concept of sin related to sex. Hula was the most prominent an obvious cultural practice. It was almost extinguished because of the ability to be aroused by such body movements. Mahu were in fact viewed by ancient Hawaiians as a moral, normal element of society that preceded missionary arrivals. Thus, Mahu were regarded as legitimate and contributing members of society. Anti-Mary Kavena Pukui believes that aikane homosexuality is not wrong, forbidden, or even evil in ancient Hawaii. She wrote a book, Olelo no Eau, and she says in her book, aikane, he puana na ke ona ona aikane. So she is saying aikane is the nest of fragrance, and sweet indeed is a good friend. Auntie Malia Craver has said, we lived in a confused and crazy world, disconnect from the valuable teachings of our poe, our people, and our kupuna, our elders of Hawaii. Historian Lili Kala Kame'el Le'iva says that our elite and high-ranking chiefs had references to different ways in which Hawaiian man could increase his personal mana through same-sex relationships with the elite. In conclusion, they were gender variant people in Polynesia since the 1700s. What changed was the way in which people came to view and treat it. Intolerance turned into acceptance, and acceptance turned into intolerance. This means same-sex relationships should be part of the Native Hawaiian past and ought to be part of our society and part of the definition of ohana, family. Many local families today include someone that's LGBTQ, and sometimes it is hard for us to come out to our family communities, and it's hard for brothers and sisters and island people to talk about sex or even same-sex relationships. What gives us strength as an island people is the Hawaiian value, hano hano, tolerance, ha'aheo, pride, and the most important, aloha. This brings us back not to discount our past legacy, and as a small island community, let us not ostracize people who are different. This is our kuleana, our responsibility, and malama to take care of each other, and ho'omalu, protecting all people, no matter where you come from, protecting everybody. Mahu, aikane, everyone. And that is my talk to you today. Um, Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to uh, to share a little bit history on iconic relationships in old Hawaii. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Brad, for sharing that history. So that's definitely a lot of things that I never knew about going into it. And let me just stop this real quick. 1 second.
Yeah.
Sure.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I really did appreciate how you're talking about the diversity, especially at the end, because I think that that's something that's so important, because the more diverse that our community is and the voices that have a say in what's happening at a societal, global, organizational level even, just leads to stronger organizations and communities. Because if it's too homogeneous in any one area, you start to lack divergent thoughts and how you can help better the situation that you're in. So having that diversity, I think, is really important. And I think that bringing some of the historical context of those iconic relationships is really important. And I think when we talked earlier, you said that there's a couple different types of words for iconic, and those were kinds of relationships. Do I remember that right?
Yes, yes, and it's Aikane and Aibagine. So, and the different words and you know how, and that was part. I don't think everybody knows that that was part of Hawaiian culture. That was our culture, and it was suppressed by when the missionaries came. They were like, what is going on here? Um, and they broke our kapu. I think what happened was with Native Hawaiians, because it broke that culture, because it break that, it also break our history, and it goes from one level of family of members and goes down and down. So that's why our Hawaiians, we have so much problems, and the reason why we have so much problems because of what happened in the past. Um, and it's just another thing, another layer. Um, and my thing is to make sure that we understand in a kind, in a in a in a in a way that in an empathetic way to understand where these people come from or icon and relationships. That's where I come from, just to understand. You don't have to accept, but as long as you understand. Um, and there is, I want to say one more thing, if you don't mind, Keith, or share a little story of Kapai Mahu. If you've been to Waikiki and right by the Duke Kahanamoku statue, or right by the police, there's a police station, and there's also like a little drive-in place where you can get food and shave ice, etc. There's there's four pohaku, and there's a gate across. That pohaku is called Kapai Mahu. Kapai Mahu, how Kapai Mahu came was these Mahu came from Tahiti, and they didn't look male, they didn't look female, but they had that male female look about them. There were also four of them healers, and people, they went to different people and healed them. Seriously, they did heal them. But what happened was, the people rejoiced, and the people said, "Oh my, these Kapai Mahu is," and they had specific names, by the way. But this Kapai Mahu is they're helping us with our lapao, our medicine. So so in in gratitude, they gave Kapai Mahu these four huge boulders, and these boulders came from Kaimuki or Kaimuki. Uh, I like to say the right word, Kaimuki. So so these boulders came from Kaimuki, and they rode them all the way and gave them as gifts. And the reason why these boulders were gifts, because it was, I believe they were a long time ago, uh, there were meteors, there were meteor rocks that came. So, and these were special. So what happened was they were praying, the whole village or the whole Ahupua'a came and gave ceremony to the Kapai Mahu. What happened was when that ceremony started, it lasted for one day. And what happened at the very end, just before the sun rose, the Kapai Mahu disappeared right in front of everyone. So those pohaku has never moved. Those pohaku has stayed, as the when Hawaii became recognized as a state, etc. Even like beforehand, those pohaku stayed. Those pohaku were dedicated to the Kapai Mahu, to the Mahu. So that's a story that I would like to share. I mean, thank you for letting me share that little story of Kapai Mahu. So the next time when you come to Waikiki, take a lei to Kapai Mahu. It's a very special place for me. Although, and we have people that come and clean because the birds make their 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 nests on the pohaku. But it's a very special place, Kapai Mahu. oh, one more thing. If you're interested, you can watch Kapai Mahu on YouTube, and you can watch that on YouTube. So if you can get that.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing the story. I've seen that YouTube video, so I just dropped it into the chat. I dropped in like a 2-minute excerpt. It's really a sweet little video about it. Thank you, Kumu, for sharing.
Yeah, it really is a really good, it's an important part. And you're going to be like blown away because you're like, wow, for real? For real. For real. It really happened. And these Oahu has never moved. It was always there. So wow. So and when you watch that video, you're gonna be blown away by what happened. So anyway, so thank you everyone. Any questions?
Question?
Yeah.
What would you say are some of the modern day challenges facing our LGBTQ community in Hawaii?
So I think the challenges is family acceptance. I think that's one of the biggest problems. I could say that from my family, even though they knew I was gay, it was hard for them. It was hard for my father to accept it. And I got to tell you, my father, the year that passed away, we both sat down and he was looking at some pictures from old. My father was a musician. He played, he had a big band back in the 30s. So he was looking at those pictures and saying, wow, that's a good idea. What happened was, it was amazing because he started crying. And I thought it was because of the pictures, but then he started really crying, like heaving crying. And then he turned to me and he said, you're a good man. You're the first one to graduate from college. You're the first one to get good grades in school. You went away and you were successful, and you went away to take, and then you came back to Hawaii. You left that all behind to take care of me. And he says, I'm so sorry. He actually said sorry to me. And it was, so many families are like that in Hawaii. So that's just one example, but it's a hard place to come out, especially coming out to your family. You have responsibility to your family. So that's how I felt. I had a responsibility to my family, so I came back from San Francisco to live here again. I lived in San Francisco for 12 years. But so just, and getting away from that, I got to tell you, this is getting away from Hawaii to San Francisco was uplifting. I grew. I finally was a man that could be who I was and not have my parents on the back. Now, when I came home, I was like, oh my God, I knew that was going to happen. So yeah, it's kind of rough. You have parents, you have to take care of them. So, yeah.
And how does the LGBTQ community rally to address that obstacle in their modern experience?
So that obstacle, I think, how we now, now it's different. Now I'm telling you what happened in the past. So right now, it's pretty nice to see this new generation of 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds coming out, and they don't have that hanging down, because for us, we had a lot of shit we had to take care of. And I think this new generation coming up, lucky, they're really lucky, more happier, and a lot more settled than most. So,
and because of the work that was done by the leaders before, so thank you for helping pave that way.
Yeah, and it was hard. It wasn't an easy road. I mean, we had to fight for everything. To be very honest, in 1984, I joined a group in San Francisco called ACT UP. They were militant. They were a militant gay group. We're militant, so militant. And so that's the idea I was militant too. And in 1984, we laid down in front of the Moscone Convention Center. 250 of us laid on the ground, and not on the ground, but on the road. And we stopped traffic for 6 hours. And because we stopped traffic for 6 hours, then the city of San Francisco decided to say, hey, we need to help people with HIV or AIDS. So that was the ticket. That's how we did things back in those days. We're militant. Today, they're not so militant. They're just having fun. They're lucky, to be honest. We had to fight. We had Stonewall as well. You know, I think when Stonewall happened, that's when I came out to my parents. I said, that's it, I'm coming out. So that's my way of coming out. And that was kind of rough, I gotta tell you. Right now, I'm fine. I'm happy. You know, I'm good. And what I do to teach people of our past. So, thank you.
And
So I wanted to comment. Yeah, I wanted to comment a little bit about it, just to give you guys a different perspective. So Lonnie and I grew in a household where our mother was pure Hawaiian, our grandmother was pure Hawaiian. My grandmother actually hardly even spoke English. And so a lot of the stuff that Brad is saying right now was very consistent in the way that we grew up. I mean, we had Mahu friends everywhere. I mean, I had guys that played volleyball with that had eyeliner and fingernails and whatever. And so we never thought a thing about it. In fact, our parents never said, hey, you know, don't go by those guys, or they're strange or weird or whatever. It was just totally accepted. Like, here's your cousin. And we just thought that they were like flamboyant and like wear nice different clothes or whatever. But we never really saw them as different. And Lonnie, you can comment on this if you want, but our experiences is that in our house, I never even knew that gay was an issue until people started talking about it. Because in our family, nobody ever said anything about it. So I don't know, what's your thought about that, Lonnie? What do you think? And then I want to come back again and talk a little bit about where Rotary is kind of going with this, okay? Go ahead, Lonnie.
Well, I think we didn't realize that our parents were naturally culturally sensitive. I mean, we didn't even notice that there were Black people on the military base in Kaneohe next to us. I mean, everybody just looked the same to us. We had no idea that people were different. We actually had no idea. So, yeah, and when I traveled to the South Pacific, Fiji, etc. All of the Mahu men and women were just all part of the family. It was one. Everybody was together. There wasn't any kind of division where you treated another one differently. In fact, they actually leveraged their talents more. You know, like somebody was an excellent lei maker, somebody else was an excellent dancer, and he happened to be male. I mean, all of it was just celebrated. So it's just interesting to bring out such a provocative subject to our Rotary team.
And when I was attending Kamehameha, and this was right after the Casimeros went out, right? And so in the early 70s, so we were starting to understand the full kaona of everything, right? So not just, here's the literal meaning, but there's another meaning that's beyond that. And I gotta tell you, Robert Casimero did a lot to just say, no, these songs are highly sexual. And what they really mean is this. And when you're young and you start to understand that Hawaiians always wrote things with multiple meanings in that, and that if you didn't understand the whole kaona of it, it was really hard to just, to to just understand the literal of it. I mean, the literal meaning was like, okay, well, that makes sense. But when you dig deeper into it, yeah, they were highly sexual beings. But before we run out of time, I just wanted to mention that where Rotary is kind of going with this, right? Because their whole emphasis, or the direction they're going, is the whole DEI, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they're promoting it really at every level, that Rotary is a open organization that welcomes people of all genders, beliefs, sizes, shapes, whatever. And part of it, I've had people ask me, when I did research, because that's what people are doing now, when they join the organization, they're starting to do research and like, what was the origin of this organization? What was it really about? Because what they're discovering is some of the origins of organizations that we know were, they were racist. I mean, so people ask me, so doesn't it concern you that Rotary started out as a bunch of white rich guys? And I said, yeah, it might have started out that way, but you look at the first Rotary club that was established outside of the United States, it was the Philippines. And they have managed to go across the entire world and open Rotary up to everybody. In fact, and I'll stop right here, is that the fastest growing part of Rotary is not in the US, it's actually in Asia and other countries outside the US. So, the concept of doing good for your neighbor, community, your nation, your Rotary Club, that is something that's catching on everywhere. And it's catching on because Rotary has made themselves available to the acceptance of people from everywhere. So I'll stop talking because otherwise keep going. But somebody else can talk about that.
Oh, thank you, Ben. Anybody else have any last minute comments before we wrap it up?
I would like to share. My son came home from his Imiloa summer camp program, and he said in 5th grade they were playing versions of this song called "I'm Blue." Have you heard? Do you remember that song in the 90s? I'm blue, da ba dee da ba da. The song. And they would change the words. And he said, "Mom, you want to hear something you're not going to like?" I said, "Okay, yeah, all the time. Tell me." And he said, one of the 5th graders sang, "I'm gay, da ba dee da ba da," and then turned that last emphasis in. And I said, well, And so then it opened up a really healthy conversation about what did the 5th grader mean, and what do you think about people overhearing that, and what happens if one of your classmates is gay? How might they feel hearing that, and how did you feel when you heard it, and how could you respond? And just to kind of, it is still going around, even at I think most commonly, or maybe most commonly at the elementary school level, where they're playing with these concepts and they're working out, social interactions. And that might be some of the first glimpses of ignorant homophobia. And so just kind of just recognizing that there's still work to do. There's still work to do to help our youth grow up realizing that, equality is important.
Just stuff I want to share one more conversation I had with Jimmy Souza, right? And Brad, Jimmy Souza was one of our charter members, right? Our club chartered in 1956. Oh my God. Rotary from 1956 up into 2021 when he passed away, right? And so one of the things he told me when I was club president, he says, in the 80s, they started talking about admitting women into Rotary. And we were all sitting there, and people started talking about that subject, and we all collectively said, this is going to be a freaking disaster. We can't get them into our organization. So he said, but once women arrived, and in our club, Juana Gasso was the first one who arrived in 1987, or she graced us with her presence. He said, I didn't understand how we could have done it without women, later on. And so now, I mean, your presence here now and your conversation, I'm sure that if we had our full Rotary Club in person. There will be some people that will be squirming a little bit about talking about this subject, but it is exactly like how it was. Jimmy Suze explained it to me in 1980. So this is just 40 years fast forward. So we're making some progress, and I think it's great. And I appreciate you coming on and talking about this and the courageous life that you lead. Simply coming out and being open and willing to tell us, to educate all of us who may not have had your experience. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Just before we go, if you don't mind, Keith, me sharing some things. I belong to the Gay Kickball League. We have over 250 members participating this year. Amazing. We have 15 teams with 250 people. Amazing, just amazing. And this coming Saturday is our first, because of the pandemic, we didn't have it last year. So now we can gather outside, and we can do exercising and games and team sports. And I'm glad that we have that opportunity to do that. And it's such a great thing that now, guess what? Before, in my time, there was no gay sports. What is that? We have softball now, gay softball league. We have gay kickball. We have gay baseball. We have gay flag football. So that's how far we've been. I mean, I am overwhelmed by what's happening in our community. So I will be doing the Hula. I usually do the what do you call that? The celebration before the actual game starts. So I'm glad I have that position. Everyone calls me Kumu. No one calls me Brad. Everybody calls me Kumu, and that's fine. So that's where I am. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us today and for that wonderful presentation. And thank you, everybody, for participating in the conversation afterwards. As we wrap it up, I would love it if you would join me in the four-way test. So first, is it the truth?
Is it the truth?
Truth.
Second, is it fair to all concerned?
Is it fair to all concerned?
Third, will it build goodwill
Will it
and better
build
friendships?
goodwill and better friendships?
Fourth, will it be beneficial to all
Will it be
concerned?
beneficial to all concerned?
And fifth, have fun.
Have fun.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Kumu. That was awesome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.